We had a new deep dive into how Latino voters are feeling, what party they're identifying with at this point in time. This one came from the New York Times that did a poll it was New York Times and Siena College that did like an oversample of Latino voters to dig in and get some insights here. Let's go ahead and put this up on the screen. They say a majority of Latino voters are out of GOP's reach. A New York Times Siena College poll found Democrats faring far worse than they have in past with Hispanic voters, but overall the party has maintained a hold on the Latino electorate. And so what they're seeing here is obviously there has been some realignment, especially among young working class Latino males. Huge shift towards Republicans. There is weakness for Democrats in some areas. And I think it also, I mean, the big thing you get out of this is like, we talk about the Latino community, like that's a fiction. There's a very different picture in the South with Latino voters than in other parts of the country. So in the South, you've had more of a realignment, especially in Florida and Texas, towards Republicans than you haven't had in other parts of the country. They say that Democrats have maintained a grip on the majority of Latino voters, driven in part by women, and the belief that Democrats remain the party of the working class. Overall, Hispanics are more likely to agree with Democrats on many issues, including immigration, gun policy, and climate, and they are also more likely to see Republicans as the party of the elite and as holding extreme views. Majority of Hispanic voters, 56%, still plan to vote for Democrats this fall, compared with 32% for Republicans. But again, the trouble spots are, handling of the economy. Trouble spots are, there is a sizable chunk of the Latino electorate that does agree with Republicans on issues like crime and the border. And they asked about Latinx. And they found basically like, they didn't really like the term, but they weren't like offended by it. Right. So anyway, that's kind of the big picture, is they're trying to make the case that even though there has been some shift towards the GOP, there's still a bulk of Hispanic voters that identify more with the Democrats and feel like the Democrats are still the party of the working class.
I just still felt like it's a big cope, which is that nobody's ever claimed that Republicans are winning the majority of Latinos. The whole point is that if it's even 55-45, like it's actually a huge disaster, because we're winning it by 75-25 like 5 years ago. So what happened? Go and look at the margins on Obama.
Compare this to the expectations of the Democratic Party just a few cycles back, especially when back in 2012, all the way up through Trump's first election, when the thought was, because his rhetoric was so extreme in terms of the border and immigration, that you'd have a flood of Latinos in the Democratic camp. I mean, this was actually fierce all the way. Republicans were secretly very afraid of this as well.
Yes, this was Mitt Romney believed this. Yes, you're correct.
Yeah, and there was, remember after 2012, this whole autopsy where you even had people like Sean Hannity saying like, we got to soften on immigration. We got to reach out to this constituency in a different way, which was also very, all around the whole political class, the idea that you could that immigration was the only issue that this large and extraordinarily diverse group of voters cared about was always really, I mean, frankly, racist and incredibly essentializing. So there was that mistake. And then obviously after 2016 and then in 2020, when Trump gains with this demographic, it's like, what the hell is going on here? So compare where they are now, where it's like, well, we're not doing, Democrats are doing not that great, but they're still barely holding on to a majority, versus the expectation that this was going to become a solid Democratic voting bloc the way that African Americans are. There's a very different reality that has unfolded.
My reaction to this is Latinos, they're just like all of us, as in they are bifurcating on class lines, predominantly on whether you have a 4-year college degree or not.
Gender lines too.
And gender too. No, but that's the GOP as well. It's the only group, once again, who actually voted less as part of a demographic in 2020 were white men. Every other black man, Latino man, Indian man, whatever, all went much more Republican, including women as well. So it's more like a white man felt like shame, I guess, and decided not to vote for Trump. But like in general, gender split has always been extremely reliable on whether you voted. Like they did that one map, right, where it's like if only women voted, every single state would have gone blue. If only men voted, and the vast majority would have gone. It's always been a major dividing line in America. Nobody likes to talk about it, but it is true. So especially when you introduce the class dynamic, I mean, once again, one of the best predictors outside of gender and guns is, did you go to college or not? Shocking. it turns out Latinos are just like all of us.
Yeah.
And vote just like everybody else.
Well, and the difference between Latinos in the South and other parts of the country was also interesting to me, and also makes a lot of sense. I mean, in Texas, you have a lot of Latinos who've been there for generations. I mean, you know, it's a different.
It's an own identity. This is you know, this has also driven me crazy. It's like you have people there in Texas that are fourth, fifth generation, sometimes before even, you know, the whites showed up in Texas. So they're like, yo, like we don't look at ourselves as Mexican. They're like, we're Texican. They're, you know, and sometimes they even there's a term which is like nebulous, but it does mean something, like white Hispanic. Yeah. Like where they literally consider themselves white, which is fine. I mean, you can consider yourself whatever you want, but they legitimately do not consider themselves and really have any real like cultural connection to like a new arrival from like Puerto Rico. Yeah. They're like, we don't really have anything in common. We have a very distinct culture. They're like, we have a deep connection to Texas, to the land. They're like, even Mexico. They're like, yeah, we know it's close by. May have relatives, but like, we're very different people.
Border Patrol also an important source of jobs in
Border Patrol,
border communities and
everyone forgets this. To work for Border Patrol, you know, you have to speak Spanish. Who do you think that the best bilingual people near the border are? Most of these people are Latinos themselves. So yeah, it's always annoyed me, like the erasure of who a lot of these people
Florida,
are.
you obviously have large Cuban, but also growing Venezuelan population, where the politics again are very different. So anyway, that's the latest breakdown. Reflects a lot of the shifts that we've seen in other polling, and pretty interesting to dig into the different issues and the way it's being viewed in with Hispanics across the country. Cable news is ripping us apart, dividing the country, making it impossible to function as a society, and making it impossible to know just what is true and what is false. But the good news is they are failing and they know it.
That is why we're building something new, a new mainstream, a healthier one, something more trustworthy, something that we are going to need in one of the most pivotal times in American history. We are building up here for the midterms, for the upcoming presidential election, but we need your help. So if you can help us out by becoming a premium member today at breakingpoints.com, we're trying to change America for the better and the entire world.
So what are you waiting for, guys? Go to breakingpoints.com and sign up and help us build a new mainstream.